Most of our transactions, one with another, can be judged in moral grounds, but cannot be talked about in terms of rights, because there are no rights governing the way we ought to treat our children, the way we ought to treat our colleagues, except in the extreme cases where there are laws to prevent committing criminal offences against either our children or our colleagues. Now, in the case of humans, people sometimes argue for a Bill of Rights. So when we talk about animals, we're talking about vast numbers of creatures who have nothing in common whatsoever except that they're non-human. And personally, I rather object to lumping all these creatures together and thinking of them as one sort of creature. A Bill of Rights for animals would indeed be a very weird Bill of Rights, because the purpose of a Bill of Rights is equality. And are we really convinced that a Bill of Rights should treat the needs to live of a virus as of exactly equal importance as the needs to live of, let's say, a young lamb or a young
Most
hen?
people would say no. I think most animal writers are really arguing that the closer animals are to humans, biologically speaking, evolutionarily speaking, that is, the more rights they should have. So where does the cut-off come? Primates, mammals, vertebrates? Now, the moment you concede that question, you realize that the decision is entirely arbitrary, that it is we as humans who are conferring rights on animals, not the animals themselves. And put like that, you can see that the debate is not like that about human rights, about women's rights, about black people's rights, in which the oppressed subjects of history stand up and demand justice and equality. It is an argument about how we, as humans, should behave. And it's just here that the biological discontinuity between humans and other animals becomes important. Our concern for how we treat other species springs out of our very humanness as biologically and as socially constructed creatures. We don't expect cats to debate the rights of mice, so the issue is not really about animal rights at all, but about the duties that we have just because we are human. I'm quite sure we do have such duties, to behave kindly to other animals with a minimum of violence and cruelty, not to damage or take their lives insofar as it can be avoided, just as we have duties to the planet's ecology in general. But these duties are limited by an overriding duty to other humans. I have a much loved and exceedingly beautiful cat, but if I had to choose between saving her life and saving the life of my child, I would unhesitatingly choose my child. What's more, I'd save any human child at the expense of my cat, and my cat at the expense of a fish. And so would the vast majority of people in this room. That is species loyalty, speciesism if you like, and I am proud to be a speciesist.
It's certainly undesirable for us to, from some lofty position, to define the rights of others. There has recently been an attempt by the United Nations, a successful attempt, to swear a convention of children's rights. Now, I'm fairly certain that children themselves were not consulted. Otherwise, instead of the right to go to school, they might have asked for the right not to go to school. They might have asked for the right to have a parent of either sex, for divorce to be outlawed, for the right to have 4 grandparents, for the right to have sexual experiences with adults. Who knows what they would have been, what they would have asked for as their rights. The fact is that adult human beings conferred on them a bunch of rights, which in fact tend to be the rights that rich people want for their children, the right not to go to work, whereas the children of the poor might well have liked a right to a basic wage, seeing as they have no choice but to go to work. Now, it seems to me very curious if we're going to decide what the rights of animals should be, because animals, as far as I can understand them, are speciesist. And as animals, we also are speciesist. That Gaia
of all tonight, I call on Tom Regan to sum up the arguments for the motion.
Well, I couldn't have a more impossible task, since I don't remember ever hearing so many weak arguments in such a short period of time. But we believe, and also a good bit of rudeness as well, but we believe that the weight of the evidence impartially assembled is on the side of animal rights. People say, well, where do you draw the line? Which animals? This bespeaks a profound failure to read the philosophical literature in which this has been discussed over the last 10 years, something no educated person taking part in this debate should take any pride in. I would have thought I was listening to a collection of sophomores at times. It takes my breath away. What happened to Peter Singer? What happened to Stephen Clark? What happened to my own work? What happened to Bernie Rowland's work? I have no evidence at all that anyone representing the opposition has read so much as a single page of this philosophical work. I have no evidence. I have no evidence. None. No evidence. None. I have not heard a single member of the opposition challenge a single argument of the philosophers and the theologians. What I have heard instead are things like the following. There are no human rights, only legal rights. Only if the law recognizes them do we have rights. This is again part of the utilitarian tradition. Bentham, moral rights, nonsense upon stilts, but that's not part of another major part of Western moral tradition, and that is that the law's obligation is to accord with the moral rights that people have independent of the law, anterior to the law. The tradition of the natural rights theorists, the tradition on which the animal rights philosophy stands. We are claiming that there are moral rights apart from the law, and again, that the obligation of the law is to recognize, respect, and protect those rights. We are told by Professor Rose that we are bestowing rights upon the animals. They are not claiming them for themselves, and so these are unlike other rights movements, unlike the movements on part of black people, unlike the movement on the part of women. But what shall we say of children, Professor Rose? They claim not their rights. What shall we say of the enfeebled and the deranged, Professor Rose? They claim not their rights. I take it to be a necessary implication of Professor Rose's view that they have them not according to the philosophy of animal rights, however, which grounds protects the rights of these human beings. Germaine Greer says, we are not in a position to say what is in the interest of children, that we are acting pridefully, perhaps a little arrogantly, when we bestow rights upon them. I find this scarcely credible. Granted, there may be some areas in which people of goodwill can disagree, but to think that we know nothing about what is good for children, and to think that we therefore should not mandate that what is in their interest be protected as a matter of right, takes my moral breath away.
Could you come to your conclusion now, please,
Yes.
Dr. Regan?
Because the same reasoning applies. We know not enough about the other animals, according to Germaine Greer. Again, scarcely credible in view of what we know of by Richard Ryder's work and Peter Singer's work and the work of other people, the work of ethologists and so on. We know nothing about what is beneficial to other animals. We know nothing scientifically about what is harmful, detrimental to other animals. Where are these people living? In the end, then, what I sense is the following, that the issues have not been joined, that there is still the lingering suspicion and, I dare say, belief that we are the master species. Oh, we have rights. It's the rest of creation that doesn't. Thank you very much.